To see the essence of a person, you do not need to know every detail of their life, nor do you need years of observation. The truth of a character reveals itself most clearly in just two places: in how a person treats those who are weaker than them, and in how they behave when they believe no one is watching. The first reveals the presence or absence of empathy. Power exposes the soul. When someone encounters those who cannot return the favor, who cannot defend themselves, or who cannot reward them, their mask slips. Do they exploit, belittle, and use, or do they nurture, uplift, and protect? The measure of compassion is not found in grand speeches or public gestures, but in the quiet moments where no applause will follow. It is in how one treats the waiter, the beggar, the child, or the stranger. That is where character unveils itself. The second is solitude, the secret theater of a person's conduct. What one does when unobserved is a direct reflection of their inner world. Here, the false identities, the social masks, the carefully curated performances vanish. In secrecy, the individual is confronted only with themselves. Do they honor truth even when deception would be easier? Do they uphold integrity even when temptation whispers otherwise? In these private choices lies the reality of the self. One does not need to analyze endlessly to uncover the depth of another's being. The patterns are simple but profound. Watch how they handle power, especially over the powerless. Watch how they act when their actions are hidden from view. These two mirrors reflect the core of their humanity. When we attempt to understand the essence of a person, we often look toward their achievements, their public image, or the way they present themselves in social situations. Yet these are carefully managed projections, polished masks that individuals wear to survive and thrive within society's expectations. True character, however, does not emerge in these grand, visible displays, but rather in the small and often unnoticed interactions. The way someone treats those who are weaker, powerless, or unable to provide any tangible benefit in return is perhaps the clearest window into their soul. Human beings are naturally inclined to present their best selves when there is an audience. A person will demonstrate kindness when they expect recognition, generosity when they know it will be remembered, and fairness when it enhances their reputation. But when they encounter someone who cannot reciprocate, someone with no influence, no wealth, no ability to further their interests, the mask begins to slip. It is in these encounters that the true quality of one's inner nature becomes visible, because there is no expectation of reward. Consider the dynamic between employer and employee. When power is unequal, the one with authority is given an unspoken choice to dominate or to respect, to exploit or to nurture. Many may behave with politeness toward those of equal or greater status, for there is a self-serving benefit in doing so. Yet, with subordinates or those who depend upon them, the temptation to assert superiority often arises. In that moment, the employer's treatment of the employee reveals far more about their essence than any words spoken in public speeches or written on resumes. The same principle applies in ordinary, everyday life. A person who addresses a wealthy friend with charm but dismisses a waiter with rudeness is not merely having a moment of inconsistency. They are displaying a fracture in their integrity. The powerless individual serves as the perfect mirror, for their presence strips away pretense. When a person interacts with those who have nothing to offer them, no wealth, no beauty, no influence, they are in truth interacting with their own conscience. Even in families, this truth echoes. A parent who uses authority to belittle a child rather than to guide them reveals more than a temporary lapse of patience. They expose an inward hunger for control, a need to dominate those who cannot resist. Conversely, when a parent, teacher, or elder extends patience and dignity to those under their care, they embody strength of a different kind. Strength that does not rely on subjugation. Such behavior suggests not weakness, but mastery of the self, for it is far easier to exploit power than to discipline it with compassion. The powerless have always served as the silent witnesses of character throughout history. In ancient societies, rulers who treated their slaves or servants with cruelty were remembered not only for their authority, but for their inhumanity. Philosophers observed long ago that the way a master treated his servant revealed more about the master's soul than about the servant's worth. This truth has not changed, though the settings may differ. In every interaction with someone who cannot offer a return, the spirit of an individual shines through. It is important to recognize that kindness offered in these circumstances is not a form of weakness or naivety. Rather, it demonstrates a profound awareness of human dignity, an understanding that worth is not measured by status, wealth, or ability to provide something in return. When someone chooses to respect the humanity of another despite imbalance, they display a harmony within themselves. They show that their sense of value is not dependent on constant reinforcement or exploitation, but rooted in a deeper recognition of shared existence. Many misunderstand the nature of power. They believe that dominance is a natural expression of strength, that control over others elevates the self. Yet this is an illusion. True strength lies in restraint, in the ability to wield authority without corruption, to hold influence without diminishing others. To use power to crush the weak is not proof of strength, but of insecurity. A reliance on external superiority to compensate for inner fragility. The strong do not need to remind others of their power, their presence alone speaks for them. The weak, however, crave validation and often find it by pressing down upon those beneath them. Therefore, observing how one treats the powerless is not merely an ethical exercise, but a psychological revelation. Every harsh word, every careless dismissal, every exploitation of vulnerability is a confession of the inner world. These actions reveal a disordered psyche, one that relies on external hierarchies to stabilize itself. On the other hand, kindness toward the powerless reflects an individual whose psyche is balanced, whose inner self does not require domination to feel secure. One might ask, why is this such a reliable measure? Because in the presence of those who cannot offer anything back, there is no incentive for performance. There is no stage, no applause, no material gain. What remains is raw instinct, the true impulse that governs one's interactions. A person can fake politeness with equals, they can craft charm for superiors, but they cannot consistently fake their treatment of those they deem beneath them. The powerless strip away illusion because they have nothing with which to bargain. This principle extends beyond human relationships and into how one interacts with the world itself. Those who abuse animals, destroy nature, or take pleasure in harming creatures unable to resist are laying bare the truth of their souls. These acts cannot be excused as trivial, for they reveal the fundamental orientation of the self, whether it seeks harmony or domination, creation or destruction. The powerless in any form, human, animal, or environment, serve as the canvas upon which the character of the individual paints itself. It is often said that power corrupts, but perhaps more accurately, power reveals. It uncovers what was already present within, merely hidden beneath the constraints of social expectation. Gives someone power over another being who cannot resist, and the essence of their morality is brought into the open. Those who act with cruelty were already cruel. Power merely gave them permission. Those who act with gentleness were already compassionate. Power merely gave them the opportunity to express it. Thus, if one desires to understand who a person truly is, they must turn their attention not to the grand arenas where masks are worn, but to the small corners of daily life where power imbalances emerge. It is in these places, these seemingly insignificant moments, that the truth of character is revealed. The powerless are the silent judges, for through them, the hidden self becomes visible. When we think about the truth of a person, we often assume it is revealed through their public acts, their words, or their social standing. But the deepest layer of the self emerges not in these visible spaces, but in the hidden ones. When an individual is certain that no one is observing, when the stage lights of society are dimmed and the masks of performance are no longer necessary, their authentic nature comes forth. A person's private actions, their choices in solitude, and their conduct in secrecy reveal more about their essence than all the roles they play under the scrutiny of others. Human beings are inherently social, and much of what they present to the world is shaped by expectation. We are taught from childhood to perform, to adapt, to wear masks that secure approval, avoid judgment, and allow us to move smoothly within the structures of society. In public, almost everyone is capable of kindness, generosity, and morality because these actions bring recognition, respect, or at least the avoidance of shame. Yet in solitude, where the gaze of others does not exist, all incentives vanish. There, only the naked self remains, unshielded and unguarded. Imagine the individual who speaks eloquently about honesty in public, but secretly deceives when they believe no one will know. Their speeches are hollow, for integrity is not measured in what one proclaims, but in what one does without witness. Likewise, the person who acts generous when others are present, but is miserly and cruel in private life, exposes that their kindness was never genuine, only a tool to uphold an image. These small, hidden behaviors may seem insignificant, but they are, in fact, the clearest reflections of the psyche. The private realm is a mirror where the shadow becomes visible. Within each person exist impulses, desires, and instincts that are often denied or suppressed in order to maintain the mask of respectability. When alone, one's relationship with these inner elements is revealed. Do they indulge in deception, manipulation, and cruelty because there are no consequences? Or do they continue to honor truth, compassion, and respect even when no external judgment is possible? This difference speaks volumes, for it is not shaped by external rules, but by inner alignment. Solitude is a difficult space for many precisely because it confronts them with themselves. Without distraction, without performance, without others to mirror back approval, the individual meets their own reality. Some cannot bear this and seek constant noise, activity, or company to avoid the encounter. But solitude strips away illusion, leaving only the authentic self. What a person chooses in that space is an act of ultimate honesty. If they betray themselves in solitude, it signals that their entire external identity rests on fragile pretense. If they remain faithful to their values, even unseen, it suggests that their principles are rooted deeply within. Consider the example of a leader who publicly enforces laws of morality and justice, but privately abuses power, indulges in corruption, or exploits others in secret. The public may revere them as righteous, but their hidden life betrays their true state. Or think of a teacher who preaches respect and integrity in front of students, but engages in dishonesty when unobserved. These contradictions are not minor flaws, but profound reservations. The authentic self is not in the public sermon, but in the private choice. This principle extends beyond moral conduct into the subtleties of thought and habit. The stories a person tells themselves when alone, the way they treat their own body, the rituals they maintain in the quiet hours, all of these are expressions of the real character. Some use solitude as a time of growth, reflection, and self-discipline. Others use it as a space for indulgence and impulses they would never admit to in the open. The divergence between public identity and private reality can be vast. And it is within that gap that authenticity, or lack thereof, is revealed. One can see this truth even in the smallest of acts. How a person speaks when they believe no one will hear them reveals the tone of their soul. How they behave when holding access to resources no one else is tracking demonstrates their honesty. How they spend their time when free from obligations shows where their values truly lie. These details may appear minor, but they are the threads from which the fabric of character is woven. The hidden self also exposes the relationship one has with their shadow, the darker impulses that reside in every psyche. Everyone carries envy, anger, lust, pride, and the desire to deceive, but not everyone chooses to act on them when unseen. The individual who acknowledges the shadow yet disciplines it even in private life demonstrates self-mastery. The one who indulges it freely when hidden reveals that their public restraint was never rooted in discipline, but in fear of exposure. Thus, the hidden realm is not just about morality, but about the entire structure of the psyche, whether it is governed by conscious values or by unconscious impulses. In this sense, solitude becomes a test, a place where character is refined or corrupted. A person who honors truth in secrecy develops an inner strength that does not rely on external reinforcement. They grow into wholeness because their inner and outer lives are aligned. In contrast, one who repeatedly compromises their values in private while maintaining a facade in public fragments their psyche. They live in conflict between the mask and the self. And over time, this dissonance erodes both integrity and peace. To understand someone deeply, then one must look not at how they act under the eyes of others, but how they conduct themselves in moments of invisibility. What do they do with their leisure, their unobserved hours, their hidden choices? The answer to these questions provides more insight than any declaration, more truth than any carefully managed persona. A person who treats others with respect only when society demands it, but disregards them when no one is there to judge, exposes hollowness. A person who upholds principles only when they know they are being watched, but abandons them in private, reveals that their morality is external, not internal. On the other hand, the individual who maintains dignity, compassion, and truth, even in secret, demonstrates that their values are not masks, but extensions of their being. What emerges, therefore, is a profound paradox. We spend much of life trying to know others through their visible selves, yet their hidden selves often remain invisible to us. Still, we can sense it indirectly. Contradictions slip through, inconsistencies emerge, and the weight of secrecy eventually surfaces. No mask can be worn forever. The secret life always leaves traces, and those who look closely enough can perceive them. It is through these subtle signs, these hidden actions, that the truth of a character becomes visible. Power and secrecy act as mirrors, reflecting the true nature of a person more clearly than any words or appearances ever could. When individuals are placed in positions of authority, their inner world is projected outward. Authority strips away the illusion of equality, and in that imbalance, the authentic self is revealed. Some, when given power, use it to control, diminish, and assert dominance, showing that their sense of self relies on the subjugation of others. Others, however, use power to uplift, to create safety, and to nurture growth, demonstrating that their strength is not rooted in domination, but in an inner balance that does not need validation. Power is a mirror because it amplifies what already exists. Cruelty becomes more cruel, kindness more evident, insecurity more desperate, and wisdom more radiant. Secrecy, on the other hand, reveals a different layer of the human soul. When no one is observing, there is no longer an external reason to maintain appearances. Without the gaze of society, every individual is stripped of the need to perform, and what remains is the unmasked self. In secrecy, one discovers whether a person's values are genuine or merely borrowed from social expectation. Do they act with honesty when no punishment threatens them for lying? They uphold integrity when no reward follows. These private choices form the clearest measure of who they truly are. Just as power exaggerates the inner self, secrecy uncovers it by removing all incentives for performance. Together, power and secrecy form a complete reflection. Power shows how one handles control over others, while secrecy shows how one handles control over oneself. The two are inseparable, for both test the individual in ways that cannot be rehearsed. A person may act kindly in public to win admiration, but in secrecy, without witnesses, their behavior either confirms or betrays that kindness. Likewise, a person may speak humbly, but when power is handed to them, humility is tested and often discarded if it was never real. Observing these two conditions provides insight that no words or appearances could. When authority is given, masks slip. When no one is watching, masks dissolve. The self is illuminated in these crucibles, not through declarations or carefully crafted identities, but through instinctive choices made in moments where the truth cannot be hidden. Those who remain grounded in both circumstances reveal a wholeness that is rare, a self that is not fragmented by the need for validation. Those who falter expose that their character was never aligned, but only constructed for the eyes of others. It is in power and in secrecy that the deepest essence of a human being becomes visible, because these two mirrors reflect the soul without distortion.